Hello, Ojai. My name is Andy Gilman, and I'm running for mayor this year in Ojai. And I'm speaking to you from one of my favorite places in the valley, which is our backyard garden. And I hope that the heat's been okay for you. Our tomatoes are loving it. We're having a great year, and it's wonderful to be back here. Today is August 7th, and that means we should know very soon who all the candidates are for our public office. And I hope all of the candidates, for whatever office they're going to be running for, will agree to civil discourse, avoid wasteful spending, and keep focused on the issues. And so I hope we can all do that well together. I think we can, and I think we could change the national trend of intolerance of other points of view and get to something that really is best for Ojai, whoever that candidate ends up being and whoever wins these elections, that the best for Ojai can emerge in a way that doesn't create a lot of disunity in the wake. And I believe we can do that. I'd like to take just a few minutes to talk about some of the issues Ojai is facing, and most of those issues are complicated, whether that is housing, water management, even pickleball. All of those have multiple facets, and the solution is not as simple as a headline, as we all know, even though we might want that. But also the solutions can be very interesting in that a single solution can solve multiple issues, and that's what I would like to spend a moment talking about. On the website, andygilmanforojai.com, I've put some writing there, it's under section political writing, that I hope you'll take a look at, and I want to explain just a couple of points about that. So if we think about climate action, for example, environmentalism, environmental sustainability, pick the expression you would like to use there, we tend towards solutions that are very pointed, and that's okay, it's even good. I would like to suggest that we broaden the conversation very much to say, let's take the best science, the best that the world has done related to how our climate is changing and what are possible solutions. So the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change would be one source that I would like to go to regularly. For example, if we think of something like prioritizing what we should do as a valley, the first and foremost thing that I want to suggest in any climate action conversation would be fire safety. And what I mean by that is a wildland fire like we had in the Thomas Fire, for those of you who were here in the 80s, the Wheeler Fire. That seems to me the first priority of our government is to work on that wildland interface and do everything we can to prevent a fire coming into our city. So that means things, it involves agriculture. It involves, as a buffer, for example, it involves hardening our homes. It may involve tree ordinances, and it may involve overhanging branches, but those can all be looked at in more detail. Primarily, if we have a fire, the carbon emission is enormous. Of course, we all get that. But most importantly, if a fire comes into our city, everything else we're going to talk about is moot. That's the first thing we have to do as a city. And we are not doing everything we can. So for example, we can appeal to our state for more funding to become a fire-wise community. That's work we can do. We have not done that yet. There are agencies working on that. And I'd like to support them 100% and fold them into the workings of the city in a much more collaborative way than we have at the moment. But then I'd like to go a little further in a way that might not be obvious to some, and I hope this helps. And that is, affordable housing is one of the issues Ojai is facing, and the City Council, with state pressure, has approved building units that are a mix of market rate and affordable, and I'm happy that the state has used that pressure on municipalities. I think it's the right direction. However, they're not ideal projects, and I'd like to lean into projects that we choose. For example, another Whispering Oaks would be a fantastic addition to our valley, I believe. That is, for our older citizens, that the rent for a Whispering Oaks location would be 30% of their income, no matter what their income is. We desperately need that. But in addition to that community of people, in general, housing that our employees could afford here. I very much want to do that. And there is a climate action dimension around that activity. And that's why I'd like to broaden the climate conversation to include that, to say people who are working here but can't afford to live here now have that option that we have leaned into and helped support. Eliminating that traffic, that is a huge plus, I think, for our community. And there's many efforts right now, workforce housing in different agencies, private and public, that are in the early stages of investigation. I'd like to support those. And then those people who are contributing to our life and our economy can also contribute to our community in a larger sense. Secondly, diversifying our economy so that there are more professional jobs here, and that's where we work at as a city to promote those things. But those two sides of this equation, reducing traffic in general, carbon emission reduction is what I'd like to promote there as part of that solution. There are several projects in Ojai. One is our paving. So as you know, you might live on a street that has been paved or will be soon. What I'd also like to do is pause ever so briefly and do the research to find out about alternative methods of paving. So for example, there is recycled asphalt, there's concrete, there's multiple solutions out there that cities are using. So when I think of all the wonderful things that all of us do individually, that could be, solar on our home, it could be moving from natural gas to electric, it could be composting in our backyard, all of those things, great, and I'm all for those things. What I'd like to do is look at some of those, what I would call the big ticket items, and at least do the research. Now, I don't know what all that research is going to yield yet, but I suggest we pause and start it right away. Not wait for the election even, and say, well, what are the alternatives? What do they cost? How long do they last? What are the maintenance costs of it? And decide what kind of carbon emission reduction could we be doing. So I hope to reach out to all of the people who care so deeply about the natural resources in our valley, being resilient, and contributing to the larger conversation. Of course, a big part of climate action, it seems to me, has to do with incentives that municipalities or larger governmental organizations can offer to its citizens, to its businesses, that can help with the kinds of activities we would like to see. And I would like to see that in our city, where we take some of that surplus that we have in our budget, look at it very carefully towards climate action, and say, what are the kinds of things we would like to see in our city that individual homeowners or business owners might have a hard time implementing financially or otherwise. For example, if installing solar, which we all favor, I think, if it's a financial burden for some, that the city would step in and offer some incentives to do that. Another idea would be simply in water management. There are other cities in California that every residence is offered a rain barrel and some instructions so that they're capturing their own water and using that for irrigation. I would love to see that program right away in our city as an expression of what we're intending to do. So incentives in general, I would say, and I'd always go with incentives over punishments first. Let's work with that. And actually that's in the IPCC report as well. Let's tailor those things so that we engender the kind of community effort that we'd like to see. There's much more in the document that I posted there, but I will conclude with one thing, which is a very long-term project. It's going to take a while, but I'd like to initiate the research now in California. And a microgrid, there's different configurations there, but it is a grid that a municipality or some larger region will implement that uses the infrastructure that is here, the electrical infrastructure, but generates its own power, typically through solar, but solar. And we have a grid that is separate from the larger grid, but also connected to it. And what I'd like to do there is, that's a very long project, but to initiate it, to say we ensure the sustainability of our own energy production. We are better equipped in an emergency to respond in those ways. They could be funded all different ways. There are national and state grants for these things. Again, that's going to require that research. There are very short-term things like incentives, like looking at the paving project, etc. And there are long-term things like a microgrid and getting the infrastructure underground. But if we can initiate the long and the short at the same time, that's where I'd like to see us go. That solve many problems at once. So I hope you download the document, read it. I would love your feedback. I'm asking for it. These are ideas, and there are people expert in many of these fields. Let's work on this together. That's what it's going to take. Let's do the short and the long term at once and build this community that will endure, have the resilience to stand another wildland fire, to stand difficulties in energy, to, I think, finally, in general, reduce our energy consumption if we can. I think we're going to have to do that eventually, but why not begin to do that now? Please visit www.andygilmanforojai.com. My intention is to be as transparent as I can be, state my intentions, my positions on policies, but also ideas to explore, and I welcome your feedback. Thank you.